So in this video we're going to take you through the initial account creation and steps required to get that first VM initialized and launched. So when you sign up with our platform, you'll have received an email with your username and password. You can go to login.vscaler.cloud, enter those details and sign yourself in. Once logged in, you'll be initially presented with a summary of the resources that you have allocated to your project and account. As we can see here now, very little of that is actually used at the moment. One of the first things you'll want to do is create a network to allocate VMs against, and this will be a private internal network that you'll be able to route to the outside world on and allocate floating IPs against. So to start off with, let's just have a quick look at the network topology. So at the moment all we have here is this external net. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to create our own private network, create a router and link these two together. So let's start off now by going into the Networks tab and create a network. So initially give it a name, and it's usually useful to give it a name that reflects its purpose, so we should call this our internal net. You can then create the subnet, internal subnet, and you give it a network address. Now the network address needs to be in the CIDR format, so that would be your IP address / your subnet mask. So let's go with the default one for now, 192.168.0/24. You can leave the gateway IP blank for now. Finally, within the subnet, your DHCP service, so this will allocate IPs automatically to all of your instances, so you don't have to worry about all of that, but it's useful to put in an external DNS server in there as well, just so lookups are sort of guaranteed if you don't have a DNS running on your own private LAN. So let's create that. Now we can see we have our internal network. So let's go back to our network topology. Now you can see we have an internal net and an external net. So the next thing to do now is to create a router to allow traffic go between those two networks. So next tab down to routers, and let's create a router. Okay, give it whatever name you want. Okay, once that router is created again, you can just go back up and have a look. So now we can see we have a router created, we have our two networks, so we need to connect the router to the external and the internal network. So let's go back down to router. We can set a gateway, our route to the outside world, so we'll want to select our external network for that. It should only actually give you the option for the external network, and you can then set that as a gateway. Okay, so every time you do something as well, you should notice these success messages appear in the top right hand corner to confirm that they've gone correctly. So back up to our network topology again, so we can start to see everything taking shape. So you can see now we have a link between our router and our external network. We can see that the state is active, so that's good. The last thing to do now is actually to connect our internal network onto the router. So let's go back to our router tab, click on the router name, and let's add an interface to our router. So it'll ask you to select the subnet. This is the one we've just defined, so internal net. IP address, because we've got DHCP and everything else, it'll just automatically allocate it, so you can leave that blank. So let's add our interface. Excellent. Okay, so with that created, we can go back to our network topology, and what you should end up with is something that appears like a goalpost in rugby or something. Once you see something like this, you know that your network is created correctly and you're ready now to set up some of the other parameters within your environment. So one of the next things to do now is actually to create your SSH keys so that you can actually access any of your cloud instances. So by default, the images that are provided within the vScaler platform have been customized so that only SSH access is available on them. This is a security restriction to prevent password access, and it also prevents external users who don't have keys from trying to brute force their way into your VMs. So to access the system, you just need to create a key, and then you'll download the public key as well and use that when accessing the instance. So to do that, let's go to our Compute tab, and then Access and Security. and go into key pairs and create key pair. So let's call this our vscaler key pair. Let's create that. Okay, so what that does is that creates the key pair and actually allows you then to download the public key. You should save this in a secure location, as you'll only ever be able to download this one time. Once you've downloaded it, you cannot go off and re-download it again. This again is a security feature to prevent keys from falling into the wrong hands. So make sure that this is saved in a useful place. Okay, so once you've downloaded the key, you'll see that there is a key pair that is created here, and we'll be able to inject that into our images when we spawn them up shortly. The next thing to do is security groups. So by default, the firewall will prevent you from being able to access your system. So what you'll want to do is actually create a couple of rules that will allow access to your VM once it's actually spun up. So let's create an additional firewall group, and let's call this one SSH. Okay, let's create that. We can then go in and manage rules and add a rule. So within the rules, there's actually already one defined for SSH, so this allows all access on port 22. You can restrict it further by specifying a network here to restrict access to, but for now we're just going to leave that open. So let's add that, and we can see that we've got SSH now added to this security group. If you were doing a web browser, you'd also want to create additional groups, perhaps for ports 80 and 443, but for now let's just add that. Okay, so at this stage now we have our network created, we have our keys generated, and we have a security group to allow us access to system via SSH. So now we can go and create an instance. So we go back up to compute and instances, and we go to launch an instance. Once you click on the launch instance tab, it will present you with a form where you can input some parameters about the instance that you want to launch. So initially we'll just give it a name, so let's call it our first VM. Flavor is a reflection of the resources that will be allocated to this VM. So as you select the different resources that are available, you'll see the number of virtual CPUs, disk and memory allocated to that will be presented to you just in this pane here. The number of instances, we'll just set up one for now, but you can set up however many you want. Boot source, initially we're just going to boot from one of the images that's already stored in Glance. And we can select that now. Let's go to Ubuntu for now. Onto the Access and Security tab. So again, by default, the only key pair that we've created is selected, so that will get injected in. We'll also tick our SSH security group onto networking, and because we've only got the one internal network, that's automatically selected as well, so we can now go and launch our instance. Okay, so this will take up to a minute to create. The system will spawn, disk space is allocated, the Ubuntu image is copied across, and then it is actually booted up. So we can see within a very short space of time the system is up and running. We can actually go in, if you click on the instance name and then go into console, we can actually see what's happening while the system is booting up, and already we can see that we've gotten through the initial boot and we're up to our login prompt now at the Ubuntu terminal. So let's go back to our instances. The last thing to do now is maybe just allocate a publicly accessible IP address. So if we go back to our network, you'll see why. So at the moment this VM has been spawned up against our internal network. So we'll want to allocate a public IP so that we can actually get access into that from the outside world. So let's go back over to our instances, and alongside the instance you'll have a list of actions. You click on the arrow and you should be able to associate floating IP. Okay, so initially you won't have any floating IPs pre-allocated against your projects. You can click the plus button, go to allocate IP. That has given us this IP address, and then we can select the port or VM to associate that against, and click Associate. So once that's been completed, you'll see 2 IP addresses now allocated against your VM. An internal one for your internal network and the external one which you'll be able to view and access from the outside world. So with that selected now, we can go and use our key pair to go and access our VM for the first time. Okay, so over onto your terminal, and we can use our usual SSH client. We can select the public key that we'd previously downloaded. With the Ubuntu image, the default user is Ubuntu, and then we paste in our IP address as well. So SSH will ask if you wanted to add a new host to your known host lists. You do, of course. One final thing to do, make sure the file permissions are correct on your key pair when you've downloaded them. So 600 means they're only readable and writable to the actual user, not to the world or the group. So you want to do a chmod on your key and then try it again. Lovely, so with that done, we can see now we've logged into our Ubuntu 14 LTS system. We have a total of 2 cores, as we'd expect from the flavor selected, and 2 gigs of RAM. So you can go off now and do whatever you need to do on that VM, and that covers the initial introduction to using vScaler.